I use the analogy, Steve and I talk about this a lot. We're on a journey of hope. There are a group of students out there that come to us for a new way, to find a new opportunity in life, frankly, to change the course and trajectory of what they're doing.
How can a set of skills lead you down the path to success? That's what we're setting out to answer on the EdUp Canada podcast. I'm your host, Michael Sangster. Join me as we unpack how leaders around the world have taken training and skills and turned that into a lasting career. Now let's learn together. Welcome back to the EdUp Canada podcast. I'm Michael Sangster, your host, and we've got an exciting start to the 2025 season. I've got the Vice Chair of the National Association of Career Colleges Board, Craig Tucker from Keyin College in Newfoundland and Labrador. We have brought in a translator to help us with the accent, but his is actually fairly mainland, so we should be okay. We're going to have a good conversation today about things that are going on at Keyin College, and I wanted to have Craig on early in the year because we're talking healthcare right now. We're really focused on the things our sector does in healthcare. And he's doing some creative things at his college. They're doing some really, really interesting stuff. And it's not what you might think. So we'll get there as we get going. But Craig, welcome.
Thanks, Michael. Good to be here.
Tell me, before we get too deep into this, about the college, because I had the pleasure of coming out and presenting one of our Career Champion Awards to Ralph and Gwen Tucker. You might know them. I think you might be related. But tell me the story about the college and how you got going out there.
Well, it's a wonderful story. It dates back, believe it or not, March of this year. It will be our 45th anniversary. So we've been around a long time. And, I love to tell the story. For me, it never gets old. But Keyin College was started by my mom 45 years ago. And she started to do training, in particular in the early days of tech space. She was with an insurance company and really had this inkling. And I asked her years later, what made you do it? And she said, I really felt there's a better way. And so that's become our brand mantra over the years, finding a better way. And we just finished a conference with 130 of our staff members from across Newfoundland and Labrador, got together to look to finding better ways to deliver on what we do. And so notionally, she got together on an evening with her best friend, who was her assistant that worked with her, and said, hey, I'd like to start a private educational institution. And I think there's a better way to do things. And on Monday morning, her best friend at the time, her assistant, said, nope, I'm not able to do it. I'm going to hold off. But she decided, no, I'm going to proceed. And 45 years later, here we are with well over 40,000 graduates in the marketplace of this province. So yeah, that's the back channel on Keyin College.
One of the things I love about this sector is that you don't talk about a university and say, Mom started it. Mom had an idea to find a better way. But tens of thousands of people have started new careers because of Keyin College in Newfoundland and Labrador, correct?
Correct. Well over 40,000. 40,000
students. And explain the word Keyin, because I think this is the best part about the college story of why you're called Keyin.
Well, my background, as you know, Michael, is the marketing and comms world. That's where I've, cut my chops over the years. Certainly known around this province as a bit of the brand guy. But Mom and Dad, when they started this thing years ago, really weren't great brand people in that context. But Keyin was literally the meaning for keying in data. And that's where the college started. And I remember the humble beginnings where we brought in this massive IBM 3742 mainframe system into the basement of our home just outside of St. John's, where the first students came in, and I got booted out of the basement, and she started there, and then it just grew and grew. And I think her focus on quality of delivery of education was second to none. And over the years, all of the IBM mainframe institutions across Newfoundland and Labrador really leaned into hiring those graduates for what was considered their terrific skill set in coding and early days of keying in data entry. So that's where the early days came from, and thus the brand of Keyin College. And it's shifted over the years. So
I just love that story of a simple name that comes out of what they were actually doing. They were just keying in data, and you've never come up with that name any other way. No family connection. I think it's an awesome story. So one of the things about Craig and our board of directors is he's probably one of the most attentive people when we're around the table, but it's more because he's paying attention to whether or not Vic Tazan is going to make him the chair at some point for every meeting. Is that fair, Craig?
Never going to happen.
Never going to happen. He keeps
I've got enough on my plate.
Keeps his head up to make sure it doesn't happen. But you're a fierce advocate of our sector, and you're a fierce advocate of our association, and you're tireless about talking to colleges across the country about things they can do better and things that you can learn from, aren't you? You and your partner, Steve.
Yeah, no question. No question.
Why are you so committed?
Well, it's interesting. We had, as you know, we had our conference this year, and we were asked this question of, why do you come back? What's this all about? Why are you attending the national conference? And our college this year brought 8 people from Newfoundland to participate. So there's a couple of key factors for me. One is, and Steve and I, when we started this journey, I actually acquired Keyin from the family 6 years ago and brought Steve in as my business partner, and we're equal partners now and driving this organization to incredible heights, frankly. But part of that is that, one of the things we looked to early, we really didn't know how good we were or what we were all about. And so we started to really utilize NAC as that national body to see what is out there, what other product, services, support tools, learnings that we could have in terms of making our college a better college. And so that was the initial inertia, was to really go and look and listen and see what's available to us. And I can tell you very comfortably today, just the supply chain, some of the suppliers that come to the conferences for NAC and talk to us, we're using about 10 of those today inside our infrastructure. And so we've partnered with them right across North America, frankly, some of the suppliers that are coming to the NAC events, and we use them inside our infrastructure on an operational basis, on a day-to-day basis. And so it's about learning. It's about getting best-in-class information from our partners. It's about partnering across with other institutions in Canada, and really, quite honestly, being open-minded to seeing what others are doing and finding ways to be best in class. And then also for me, I'm a big proponent of sharing that. So I'm not afraid, as you know, I've never been afraid to share what we're doing to help others across the country and become better nationwide.
This doesn't line up. 10 suppliers, lots of investments. Doesn't quite line up with what we went through in the media this year, does it? The quality of the institutions that we have. You're a perfect example. Any of your locations above massage parlors, Craig?
No, they're not.
No,
we've invested millions in our campuses across the province. I, openly said this to the minister when we met, Minister Miller, when we met with him. I'd say it again today, that the invitation is there. Come and see what we're doing, and don't judge a book by its cover until you really have done your research. And it's very frustrating as an organization that's been around so long, who really takes great pride and humility in our staff, in our students and graduate success, in the programs we offer, and the tenure in which we've done it. That I challenge, any of the ministers, federal ministers, any of the national bureaucracy to come and have a talk to us and sit down and see what we're doing. And, I'm an open book. My perspective has always been my data is open to be shared. If someone wants to see it, to see what we're doing, I'm happy to do so. And that's how we lead.
I've seen you do it. You live it, you share it, and it's important to do it. I was being a little cheeky there to start about massage parlors because it was one of the lines that we were faced with. But what I love about this sector is everybody just put their head down and left us to do our thing in the media to represent them, but they just went back to teaching students.
Yeah.
And I always say we're in what's considered back to school week in higher education. That first week after Labor Day, the first week after New Year's. But back to school week at a career college is a Thursday afternoon in March, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. No question.
It's not just by a schedule on the calendar.
Yeah, we're a little different in that context, that we're very much driven by semester. So we start January, May, and September, but lots of other organizations across Canada take a monthly intake in and allow the student to roll when they're ready to roll. I use the analogy, Steve and I talk about this a lot. We're on a journey of hope. There are a group of students out there that come to us for a new way, to find a new opportunity in life, frankly, to change the course and trajectory of what they're doing. And so, January is a great example of that, where they're sitting at home at Christmas time trying to figure out, what, this is not my lot in life. I want to do better. And so our measurement, our data point is about graduate statistics and success. And that means meaningful employment. And so we run the spectrum. Our particular focus is on health and technology and health innovation. And that's what we specialize in. And we don't stray, we don't veer outside those lines, but we want to be best in class in Canada in those areas. And that's what we aspire to be.
Well, I always take pleasure in saying that Newfoundland it's just a rock in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And you guys all work well together, don't you? Even with the other levels of post-secondary education, it is not about competing, is it?
No, in fact, I use that line. You've heard me say that. I live on a rock in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean, or we live on a rock, and we have to work together to succeed. And it's true. I mean, we're an island. The weather here is always spectacular. In the summer, it's always 30 degrees, and but notionally, we have to really come together in this province to be successful. And so, quite honestly, we're in the middle right now in the throes of an educational accord, which is a reform similar to the health accord that just took place here, where we're really revising where education is going for this province from K to post-secondary all the way through. And so we're an instrumental piece of that and a voice to share where education's going. The only way out of any economic downturns and things that you can do is through education. And so we're a part of that process. So ourselves, Memorial University, College of the North Atlantic, Academy Canada, and others that are in this ecosystem here, we are working together, and we're not afraid to do that. And I think that's part of the challenge across Canada, quite honestly. We have to get our heads out of the sand in this notion that because even in private education, in a lot of cases, regulated career colleges have this notion that they can't partner. That's simply not true. And they need to get better at understanding that if we don't come together as a nation and work together, we're doing ourselves and our staff and faculty, but more importantly, we're doing our students a disservice. And I think, frankly, that's where we need to put our emphasis in the coming years.
So before we get to your programs, I did like to point out, we can look up the weather on the internet and know that it's not 30 degrees most days in the summer in beautiful St. John's, but there's a reason that they use pubs for sunscreen in St. John's, because it does get a little bit of rain, a little bit of snow. But I looked up this morning, and I think you've got less snow than we do in Ottawa today.
Yeah, actually, all jokes aside, it's been like 5-6 degrees here for the past week. We have zero snow on the West Coast. There's been some in the last week, but I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to take it.
Well, and I know the province well enough to know there's a lot of snowmobilers that are not happy right now because they love to be on their sleds in the winter. So let's get into your healthcare programs, because we're really focused on making sure Canadians understand. And by that, we mean our stakeholders, the media, politicians, but most importantly, students understand the opportunities that are available. And your college represents healthcare a little bit differently. Others are teaching the same kind of things, but you create a different perception around some of the things you're doing. So talk to me about the healthcare programs you're teaching at Keyin College and show a little bit of that difference of like medical office records, assistant, the things you're talking about.
I think before I delve into or go deeper into that notion of what the programs look like, I'll share with the audience the notion that in order to truly achieve success in a vertical, in other words, where you're really honed in on something like healthcare, it takes time, it takes money, and it takes trust. And for those that are weak in the knees at either one of those three, don't get into this market, into regulated career college sector. You have to have the ability to invest properly, put your money where your mouth is, and really invest in the infrastructure, innovation and tech, supply chain, and platform management, things that make your programs better and your staff better, and really understand and unlock and invest in professional development for your people, those kinds of things. So I often challenge other regulated career colleges, and they say, I've tried, I can't get in. And I listen to them and I go, well, for how long? Because it takes investment, and it truly takes fortitude to push through those barriers and get there. The other piece for me is that notion of trust. When we started on this journey in the past 6 years, since I took over, Steve and I took over, when we first started, I was literally directed by the deputy minister when I wanted to have a meeting to, oh yeah, go through your industry association, go through your regular career college association, and you can get a meeting. And I was flabbergasted. Today we're on speed dial. And the reason for that is I went in, presented, Steve and I pitched, here's what our vision is, this is where we're going. And I remember a year later, after our first meeting with the deputy, Steve and I walked out of the meeting and he said, what'd you think? And I said, she totally thinks we're full of it. A year later, we were having a glass of wine with her and I said, what did you think of our first meeting? And she said, I totally thought you guys were full of it. The difference was, though, it was what took place after that and continues since. We say what we're doing, we do what we say, and say what we do and do what we say. We make sure we're reporting in, we're providing reports and information, we're giving it, we're an open book and open source on all of our data. We're not afraid to let them know if there's a challenge in our hands. We give them advance warning. We let them know in advance so a minister doesn't get a camera stuck in his or her face on that journey. It's about trust and building respectful and trusting approach to how we do business and how we work together. And what happens in a lot of cases is people forget that government officials have a job to do. Their job is to protect students, full stop. And so in doing that, they have a role to play and an important one to make sure that they're holding us accountable and we're holding ourselves accountable. So I appreciate the question on what programs and what we're delivering, but I think it's important for your audience to understand that the only way forward is to build that trust. And it takes time, it takes investment. You have to put your money where your mouth is. And then you have to have the cadence, the ongoing, consistent cadence in order to be successful. And I think that's fundamentally, once that foundation was built, then we could proceed with the program. So I can continue from there. But
yeah, and I think it's an important message you delivered. So I'm all good with that. Now let's just turn that though, and let's dive into these programs and the skills that people live with, because it's not just what I'm trying to challenge our prospective students out there to understand. It's not just about being nurses and healthcare aides and support workers. There's so many other roles around healthcare that you can train for and have great long-term careers. And you're good at that at Keyin College.
Yeah, I think fundamentally what we've looked at is what I call the student journey. And so it's really about understanding what the journey inside that healthcare system looks like. So we train home support worker at an entry level, personal care attendant, international personal care attendants. We're just rolling out our new LPN program, international LPN. We are also helping to train all of the international nurses coming into the province and upskilling all of those nurses on their journey. So that's a program that we've done in partnership with Department of Health and Community Services and Newfoundland and Labrador Health Services. We also have trained over 300 digital health administration staff to replace for summer relief, and also so they're all full-time employment, every one of them within the healthcare system. We also train all of the pharmacy technicians and all of the dental assistants in the province. So as you can appreciate, and we're soon to roll out a new digital dental administration program as well. As you can see, we're going deep in one area that we really know our market. We're embedded inside the healthcare system. When they're talking about future projections in terms of the needs that they have, we're not just waiting to see what that looks like. We're working with them, making sure we're targeting what areas of the province that they need specific candidates for. So we're at the table. And, as I said earlier, it takes time to build that trust, but we're sitting at the table with them when they're looking at areas within the province specifically and what programs they need delivered specifically, and delivering curated learning for them in those areas to upskill. And so that, when you understand that and you unlock that piece, it fundamentally, you begin to understand why we're doing so well.
You and I have enjoyed the occasional scotch after 11 p.m. Mm-hmm. And you may or may not have told me a little bit about the way you've done a unique practicum to support healthcare workers that are already in the system, right? In the way that you roll them out at a specific time of year to support the hospital system, don't you?
That's correct. Yeah. So one of the things we realized, I look at our organization today and I say this, you've heard me use this analogy. Someone asked me a while ago, so what are you guys? Are you a private college, regular, what are you? And I said, well, we're that, but we're an education solution provider. We're finding ways to help solve problems inside the healthcare system in particular, and also the innovation and tech space and energy as well, and those kinds of areas into the future. But I specifically, one of the things we designed is we have our digital health administration program, and the province came to us and said, we are short by 300 health administrative staff members. And it's from clerk 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through. And that was one thing where we curated a program, literally built that program from the ground up and gave them what they were looking for specifically from a curriculum point of view. But then as we gleaned, we got into the real sort of nuts and bolts of this, and we realized, you know what? They're having a problem with they're so backed up with the number of the shortfall in the labor shortage side that people weren't able, their employees could not get their summer off. So what we did is we curated a program and built a work integrated learning module in the middle. So those individuals can come in halfway through the program, provide summer relief for the staff members. They get their union tenure. So they're getting actual credit for their time and getting paid, by the way, while they're doing their program. So they're going through a program halfway through, they're bringing in revenue. They also have access to that union tenure so that when they finish the program, and we have a 98% success rate in that program, they're all getting hired back by the healthcare system following that with their union stature as well. So it's a win-win-win, and it's been an absolute gold star of a model of a program.
The thing I love about our sector is the number of employers that are sitting there waiting at the finish line to hire.
Yeah.
Can't wait. Most of them have been hired before they even complete the programs because they developed that. People talk about work integrated learning, and I chuckle. I had one of the college owners in Toronto say to me one day with this new fancy work integrated learning, you mean the thing we've been doing for 25 years?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
we've been doing by making sure people develop the skills they actually need to get a job and be successful.
Exactly right.
So that transfers me right into one of the questions we ask everybody. Tell me about a skill that Craig Tucker has that has made him successful, and whether you got that early in life or later in life or something you're still working at, because we like to encourage people with little things they can go do to make themselves better.
Patience, by far.
Is that from working with me?
In many cases. No, but really it's a lost art and a lost art form. And I think what happens is, and I hear this out of my fellow colleagues across the country, right? It's like, yeah, I'm getting tired of this and I can't get approval. And I get it. I mean, it's frustrating. There's times where, frankly, the system can't keep up with the rate of pace that we're running at to be able to deliver. Because if you think about it, on one hand, and we call ourselves an industry-driven college, industry saying, can you please get us these students, these graduates? We are desperate. We have labor shortage. We need it, and we need it now. And so by the time you build a program, you submit the program, it goes through regulatory scrutiny, gets approved downstream, and then you have a cycle before you put those graduates out. That could be 2, 3, 4 years. That's too long. And so industry by that point has shifted. And so when you think of a great example of this today is artificial intelligence. Coding 2 years ago was in massive demand. Post-COVID, there was a market demand across the planet for software developers like no other. Fast forward 3 years later, we're looking at a situation now where AI is starting to displace some of that coding requirement, as an example. So the point in all of this is, for those that run regulated career colleges, you have to be patient. If you think this is a short game and you think government officials aren't taxed with so many submissions and getting the job done and making sure that students are okay, they have a role to play. We have to understand that, and you have to be patient. And we preach it all the time. Everyone seems to be in a hurry up offense, and frankly, it doesn't work that way in this industry. And you have to be able to look ahead 2, 3 years all the time and be ready to deliver on that. And when you do that, then you start to get a rhythm and a cadence with government in particular, where they start to approve things a little more because they believe in what you're doing.
There's a great video with Tom Hanks floating around the internet, and somebody asks him about one of the things he wished he learned earlier in life. And his answer was, "This too shall pass."
Yeah.
And you're at the bottom of the valley and things are bad. this too shall pass. You're at the peak and everything is going great. Also, this too shall pass. So it's a very similar message about patience. It's also on the way down. When you're having a little bit of a down streak, take a deep breath, have a little patience, and let it play out.
And in our case, let industry be your guide. Talk to industry. I mean, you know this. You've been to the Rock enough to see what we're doing here. We are involved in every industry association available to us. We're members. We listen. We're taking in advice and counsel. We're hearing what they have to say. We're preparing our graduates, our students and our graduates and our employment capabilities for those individuals. Our instructors need PD. You have to be constantly rolling inside that industry sector in order to deliver properly. And I think if you don't have that patience and you don't have the ability to, if you're weak at the knees with that stuff, you're in the wrong group. You're in the wrong sector.
So let's finish on a couple of things here, and then we'll get to our final question we always ask. But let's talk politics. You're a fan of Seamus O'Regan. He's been good for Newfoundland and Labrador. It reminds me back to the days of John Crosby. I grew up, interviewed in December on the podcast, Lloyd Axworthy, who was good for Manitoba. Local leadership matters. It looks like we're headed into an election here, probably March 25th. By the looks of it, it'll start or soon after. What did it mean to have Seamus sit around the table for your college, for our sector?
I think it meant everything. And the reason I say that, I've known Seamus a long time, but he is a leader for this province. So he's a believer. First of all, he's a Newfoundlander, Labradorian through and through. He always will be. And he's brought a lot to this province, brought a lot back to this province in terms of pride and understanding who we are as a people in this province specifically. But he's also a huge proponent of innovation and technology and has been a champion, not just of Keyin. He's been a champion. He's a champion of innovation and tech across the board. We now have a beautiful new innovation center that's driving great opportunity. He's brought a ton of money into this province to drive new entrepreneurial growth for the tech space. So that's been his brand mantra for a long time. I'm no question a champion, a supporter or an ambassador to him in that context, because he's done a lot. But it's really also the federal government has put some programs in place that we've been able to capitalize on. And we own the pen on the largest private educational institution contract in Canadian history. The total package for the ecosystem was over $32 million. But that spawned so many other opportunities and contracts that we've gleaned because of that expertise and our ability to drive micro-credentials. And we've learned so much that we're doing more and more and more. And frankly, Seamus is a big reason that a lot of that happened. And I owe him a lot for that from that perspective. He's been terrific to work with.
And I wanted to touch on it today because it's not necessarily about Keyin. It's about the importance of elections, but its importance, it kind of winds back to the whole conversation about cadence and consistency and patience and constantly staying in front of people. One of the strengths of our sector is that we just get ourselves back in the room and we stay training the next class. And we just keep going and we keep going. But there's a little more time and effort needed on building a lot of those long-term relationships that do matter. So let me wander in, because this is an advertisement for the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, but I know that at some point Premier Fury is going to be granted sainthood from the people of Newfoundland and Labrador for what just went on. Like, talk to us.
He's getting pretty close. Yeah.
I don't think the people understand what this hydro deal with Quebec means for the province.
It's interesting because I sort of cut my statement off there a moment ago at Seamus, but I could say a lot of similar things with respect to the Premier. He's been a supporter of what we're doing. And frankly, a lot of his ministers have been supporters of what we're doing. Tom Osborne was the health minister and was just instrumental at supporting us on the early days of some of the things we were working towards. Andrew Parsons as an innovation minister was highly supportive of what we did and really got behind us in a lot of cases of driving opportunities. And it goes on and on. Jerry Byrne, there's been a number of them. So while my political stripe has been blue, years ago, Switzerland these days, and have been for quite a while. But I've truly supported a lot of this administration and what they're doing, because they're doing a really good job on and being supportive of the industry. This contract with Hydro-Quebec right now, as many know in this province, it has been a noose around our neck for a long time. We have been seeing a massive outflow of revenue to Quebec through Hydro-Quebec and the whole deal that was put together by Joseph Smallwood years ago. And by the way, I'm a former Hydro board member, and I challenge anybody to read the Brinko book. And when you read the Brinko book, you'll understand, because it's easy to sit back and criticize, why did we get such a crappy deal? Well, you got to go back in time. We had no money. And so when you're negotiating from a position of weakness versus a position of strength, changes the whole dynamic of what you're doing sitting at the table, right? And I think that's been the whole conversation of late with respect to where we are as a country right now dealing with the Americans and Donald Trump specifically. But notionally, I think we put a deal together because we had no money. And at the time, Joseph R. Smallwood was very, very strategic in going to get the Rothschilds involved and bringing them forward and utilizing their money and putting a deal together that, unfortunately, they never counted on the scale and magnitude of where the rates were going to go. And so, unfortunately, it was a misstep, but we paid for it dearly. But I will tell you this province, just in this, and we're in the middle of the public accounts on this deal and whether or not it'll be approved and so on and so forth. But on the surface, the work that's been done over the last 3-4 years by this administration and by Quebec in particular, Legault was, and I think he summed it up quite well. They asked, why is this a good deal for Quebec? And why is this a good deal for Newfoundland? And his response in Labrador. And he said, well, he's got 200 billion and I got 200 billion. I think that's a pretty good deal.
I saw that. It was very sharp the way he put that together.
Absolutely.
I saw the way he said that. It was a very good messaging for everybody at the table. No domineering partner in that deal.
No, I was at the press conference. I stood there and I went, like that. And just at a microcosm of that deal, back to what I said earlier, this notion that how do you get these deals flowing? Well, you have to have patience. Well, they had patience. They didn't do this in the public domain. They didn't talk about it, tout about it, there's nothing. We didn't hear anything about it. Some of us knew quietly in the background, you hear rumblings of stuff, but otherwise it was just rumblings. You have to be able to put investment in which we invested in getting a deal done. And, when you look at that in that context, then you say, okay, so you've taken the time, you've invested, you've listened, and you've had patience on that journey to get there. All of those things line up. That's success. And I think, this deal was a magnificent deal and will be for children and their children for years to come. It's a sensational opportunity for our province. What we want to do as citizens in this province right now is make sure we hold everybody's feet to the fire to get the debt gone, to tackle the debt. We're $11 billion in debt right now as a province. It's too much. We can't afford it. It's strapping us in terms of any bond rating that we're using and so on and so forth. So number one priority is to get the debt out of the way. And I think the plan is to do so, which I'm happy with.
$11 billion in debt. We call that a good quarter in Ottawa these days.
Yeah, no kidding.
Sadly, I'll get to our last question, but I want to wrap up a couple of things you said there, because I had the pleasure, most will know, of working with a great Newfoundland company, PAL Aerospace, for a while, and got to know the people there. And I think Canadians have got a lot to learn from the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. I joke with Craig quite often when we're around the board table, but there is a lot to learn. And what I heard him talking about here around patience and long work and quiet work, hard work, but also, I don't want it to be lost. You talked about ministers from different governments, good people, just support good people, work with them, work with the officials, find good people, work with them. We're losing that in Ottawa. I was watching just before we recorded this. It's the day before we go live to release this podcast. And I'm watching President Trump talk about annexing Canada. We have to get all of our best people working together on this. The only good news for us is, you mentioned Greenland and the Suez Canal, he might use military. Canada is just an annexation. So we got that going for us. But you've hit on a bunch of themes here that kind of all weave together about a lot of the things that we all need to do. And I'm nervous about Ottawa these days. It's very nasty. It's very mean. And it has been for a while. This isn't an end of Trudeau thing. It's been that way for a while. And we got to get back to good people. It's why I wanted to talk about Seamus a bit, because he's one of those. Jerry Burns, a neat reminiscence for me. He was a good guy in Ottawa. John Crosby, we talked about earlier, a good guy in Ottawa. So I appreciate you spending a bit of time there, because I think the story you've weaved amongst our 35 odd minutes here so far has been very important. And the other thing that Newfoundland and Labrador's got to offer that people who do not understand, at some point, everybody's got to try some cod tongues, because there's nothing better than cod tongues, in my opinion.
Agreed. Yeah, that and good fish and chips or a good halibut. So,
good piece of halibut. But let's finish up. We ask everybody, because part of what we're talking about is education, and we've been lucky. Craig and I we've had great mentors, family, business people, different people in our lives. But now I find myself getting to a point that I want to get people's mentor stories out to the next generation, because I think it's important people hear that the impact they can have on a daily basis on somebody's life by just a little bit of mentoring, or a whole bunch of it, or people who've affected their lives. So talk to me about one or two great mentors in your life that made a difference to you. And then I always ask people to tell me at the end, do you think they know they were a mentor?
There's two for me that have been instrumental over my career. The number one for me is my dad. And, he's an absolute rock of an individual, and always somebody that, while we were aggressively, Steve and I we have this mantra of fearless, but not reckless. And so we are not afraid to get after it. We're not afraid to try new things. And I think he's quite proud of what we've achieved over the last 5 years. And COVID for him would have been trouble had we not been on the scene with the level of innovation and tech that we have. And Steve and I both mentor. You use that term mentoring. We mentor a lot of tech companies here in the province, so we know that sector well, and we do a lot to help mentor companies. But he was instrumental in just the sounding board. It's that soft hand on the shoulder, say, hey, you're gonna be okay, everything's good, hang in there, doing this, or have you thought about this? And so, for me, when I watch the World Juniors and you listen to the young kids today talk about who are you proud of as part of this, and they always talk about mom and dad, but dad specifically, mom started this business, so I'm very proud of her. But dad's been a mentor specifically to me over the years, so he'd certainly be my number one. And the second is my former life. I was ended up the managing partner with Group M5, one of the largest communication group, or the largest communications group in Atlantic Canada. And so my former boss, Gary Wadden, was by far, my, outside of my dad, my next biggest mentor, and just taught me a ton. And, his tenacity, how he brought it every week to our organization. And we grew that to 220 employees across the region, and handling all the biggest brands, and understanding the strategy and research, and really diving deep into research. He was instrumental. And so, interestingly enough, from a mentoring point of view, Steve and I have inside our organization today, we have what we call a business in residence program. And so we offer organizations to come in. We've got 3 right now that sit in our presence in our corporate offices. They have access to our offices. They have access to the coffee and parking and downtown space, and utilize it. And more importantly, they have access to us to be able to ask questions. So we offer it up as free space for them. We just believe in giving back to the community, and we do that in all kinds of ways in terms of investment back into supporting community. But one of the things that we believe in is the mentors that have shaped us, we need to give back as mentors ourselves. And so we have this business in residence program that frankly is really helping a lot of these organizations get started. And so, one of the things recently, one of the individuals was working with us on it. We put him on retainer and helped their company. And he was disappointed. He said, we've done really well and I have to leave. And I said, well, isn't that great? And he said, well, my wife said you were going to say that. But the reality is people forget that sometimes, that these are positive things. If you can help these companies grow, then they can take off and bring somebody else in now, and let's see who else we can help along the journey. So I'd encourage a lot of the owners out there to take that kind of philosophy into the marketplace for them, because I think you can make a big difference in helping a lot of these organizations.
And I know you well enough to know you took as much mentoring from them as they did from you while they were there. You picked up 100%. Little things and thoughts and ideas, didn't you?
No question. Yeah, and what's funny, we had a CEO McKay Forum event recently, and someone asked that question, and they said, how do you stay current with innovation and tech? And we've got all kinds of ways to do it, but go allow a young tech startup to come into your office. You want to learn about innovation and technology? I'm an early adopter of AI, always was. I use AI a lot, as you know, and it just goes on and on. Mid-Journey, I built presentations now, and all of my stuff is done in AI. But it's because of these young individuals inside our organization that are teaching me as much as I'm teaching them.
And I knew you'd mentioned your father. I've had the pleasure of spending some time with him, and you were picking me up to take me to a charity golf tournament you're involved in one morning, and you said, I got to go the night before and get set up. My dad will pick you up at 6 a.m. He'll be there at 6 a.m., Mike. Be at the front door at 6 a.m. because he's going to be calling your room at 6:01. And he said, you guys will get along great. And I remember he picked me up at the Sheraton. By the time we got to the Delta, we were best friends. For those of you who know downtown St. John's, that's not a long drive as we headed out towards the golf course. So, Craig, thank you for joining us. Thank you for everything you do for the association. But I found today's conversation a very interesting journey of a lot of the ways that you run your company, even though we didn't plan it that way. Just the way, as I've said a few times now, you walked away through your conversations of the need for consistency of approach, patience, and focus. So I appreciate your time, appreciate your effort. Any last thoughts before we call it a day?
I believe in the NAC journey as well. Keyin is great. And that's obviously, my bread and butter in that context of, who we are. But I would say to those that are out there, have a look at what NAC is doing as well on your behalf. And I think that's an important piece. You can get a ton out of it. But I remember years ago as a volunteer saying to people, you learn a lot about people when you go to war together. And I mean that metaphorically, that, when you organize a conference together, when you're sitting on committees together, when you've got an agenda, I've got a meeting in 30 minutes with NAC because we're addressing some things. And so when you get together and really lean into it, there's a lot to get out of this. And so I do encourage you as well from a National Association of Career Colleges perspective to look at that time and investment because it means a lot. And I think you can get a lot out of it.
I appreciate the words. It means a lot. You've given us a lot of your back. And you were a trusted resource to me, no doubt, during last spring when we had our challenges, the troubles, as I call them, but we worked our way through it and we let Canadians know by the time we were done that actually we weren't the problem. We were a scapegoat, but we weren't actually the problem. So I appreciated your support as we worked our way through that. So with that, we're going to call it a day, call it an episode. And I look forward to welcoming you all back next Wednesday for the next edition of the EdUp Canada podcast. Thanks for listening to another episode of the EdUp Canada podcast. We release new episodes regularly, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you know when they are officially out. If you love this episode, please leave a 4- or 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts so that others can also discover how a set of skills can lead to success. Thanks for learning with us.